Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining the Saskatchewan Retirees Association's webcast. My name is Randy Dove. I'm the president of the SRA. We're happy to see how many members are interested in this topic, as we have 126 people logged in this morning. So thank you again for participating. As we start, we want to acknowledge that the land where this webcast originates is Treaty 4 territory, and acknowledge the treaties 2, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 10 traditional territories of Indigenous people and the homeland of the Métis. The SRA mandate is to provide services and support the needs of retiring provincial public service employees. With our 3,600 members, we continue to strive towards fulfilling our mandate. With the support of over 70 approved organizational members, we continue to attract new members and grow the association. Strength together results from your support, continued cooperation and participation, and ideas to help your board and committees meet your needs. Earlier this year, we surveyed members to better understand your interests. As a result, we received feedback from over 1,600 members, about a 46% response rate. You told us you'd be interested in more communication and more in-depth information opportunities. This webcast is the start of a series of information sessions that will continue through the coming months on a regular schedule. We're pleased today to be able to bring this webcast to you and respond to questions and concerns you may have raised about the direction of PEBA. At any time, and we understand that you are already asking lots of questions, but at any time, if you have a question, you can put it in the Ask Question box on the right of your screen. We will be identifying each member by your first name only, so that we can capture the question and you will know that your question is being asked. Where there are similar questions, we will be grouping them together in order to not have repetitive questions asked through this process. This webcast and all the questions will be posted on our website, or a link on our website, for future viewing. We've had a number of members ask us who haven't been able to join us today if there's a way that they'll be able to see the webcast. And so it will be posted in the coming days, so you can view it or review it if you choose to. And that. I'd like to now just introduce Lyle Fluter. Lyle is one of our SRA directors. Lyle will be assisting the process today with questions and helping us move through the agenda. Welcome, Lyle.
Hi.
If you have any technical difficulties during the webcast, please click the tech support web button on the top right of your screen, and Webcast Canada will attempt to resolve your issue. I'd now like to introduce Harold Hugg, Vice President of the SRA and the co-chair of the Pension and Issues Committee. Harold will introduce our guest speaker today. Over to you, Harold.
Good morning. As Randy said, my name is Harold Hugg, and I'm the Vice President of the Saskatchewan Retirees Association and co-chair of the Pension and Issues Committee. It's my pleasure this morning to introduce our guest speaker for SRA's very first information session series, Changes Are Coming at the Public Employees Pension Agency. Our guest speaker today is Jeremy Phillips, Assistant Deputy Minister, Public Employees Benefit Agency, PEBA. Jeremy heads the Saskatchewan Public Employees Benefit Agency. In his role, he oversees the administration of 12 pension plans and 23 benefit plans with totals of approximately $15 billion. This includes the Public Employees Pension Plan, PEBA, Canada's largest defined contribution plan. Jeremy has worked in the Saskatchewan Public Service since 1998 and has a graduate degree in public administration and an undergraduate degree in computer science from the University of Regina. Jeremy, welcome to our information series for SRA members.
Thanks so much. Good morning to all our attendees. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm very pleased to speak to you about PEBA's journey to becoming a not-for-profit corporation. Why don't we dive right in? Thanks very much for that generous introduction, Harold. It's much appreciated. Thought I would start with a bit about PEBA, a bit about our origins. You can see there on the slide that in 1983, we were formed as part of the Department of Revenue and Financial Services, And then in 1987, it became an agency of the Ministry of Finance. And I understand from the discussions at Cabinet at the time that there were some considerations about the proper structure for PEBA, but it was decided to put it into the Department of Revenue, and then it became an agency of the Ministry of Finance back in 1987. As Harold mentioned, our mandate right now is 12 pension plans and 23 benefit programs. We are about 150 people here at PEBA. It's important to note that there's no public money that comes to PEBA and that we don't deliver public policy. What do I mean by that? We don't go to Cabinet and we don't receive provincial funding for anything that we do here at PEBA. We are funded by the plans that we administer. That is, we operate on a cost recovery basis. So we don't receive public funds and we don't do public policy. We don't enact public policy. What we do is administer pension and benefit plans. And as I mentioned, we're funded by those plans. Now, of those plans, PEP and MEP make up over 80% of our budget. So practically speaking, they provide direction for PEBA. PEP is the Public Employees Pension Plan, which is the largest DC plan in Canada, about 70,000 members in total. And the Municipal Employees Pension Plan is a top 100 DB or defined benefit plan in Canada with about 26,000 members. Now, those two plans have a long history of working together. They work together on the administration side. They actually share an administration system, and they also invest side by side. They don't invest together, but they do invest side by side in a number of different investments. So a long history of working together. And in 2020, PEP and MEP directed PEBA to look at options with respect to our operating structure. And from that direction, we developed this plan to become a not-for-profit corporation. And what I'd like to speak to you or highlight to you today is that there are three elements of this plan that I want to share with you. The first is that the idea is a lift and shift. We are a nonprofit essentially right now, cost recovering from the plans that we administer, and will be a nonprofit in the future. And we'll be lifting and shifting in the sense that it will be the same people providing the same services to the same plans and the same members. So there's no contemplation here of changes with respect to the people that administer the plan today, our staff, the services that we offer, or the plans that we offer services to. So lift and shift is one of the key principles that we are using and that the MEP and PEP gave us to operate with in this project. Second is that this not-for-profit corporation will be controlled by both PEP and MEP. They will be the only two members of this not-for-profit corporation. And so they'll have two levers to control the organization. One will be through funding and the other through appointments to the board. And I have a slide coming up on that. So the MPC will be controlled by PEP and MEP. And this whole plan was reviewed by M&P. PEBA did some work on this, and then M&P reviewed that work and gave a report to the plans. And that plan was subsequently shared. That report was subsequently shared with all members in May. Now, I should say that this plan has been around for quite a while in the sense that long-serving PEBA employees have always believed that we'd be heading in this direction. And there were a number of reports over the last 20 years that pointed in this direction as well, that addressed some of the challenges and opportunities of PEBA's structure. But let me speak to the benefits then of this plan. Why a not-for-profit? Well, first of all, it addresses what we call the three master issue. Right now, PEP and MEP and the government of Saskatchewan are those three masters, in quotes, that each of those organizations, PEP, MEP, or the government, could provide direction to PEBA and do provide direction to PEBA, but none is sufficient to be able to provide the only or exclusive direction to PEBA. So this addresses that issue through a corporate board, that PEBA would report to a corporate board on operations, strategy, and risk management. So the corporate board provides that single governance body to hold PEBA accountable. We'll still serve all the plans that we serve, but a corporate board provides that one single source of accountability. It also aligns with best practice. If you look around the country, you'll see something different than what you see in Saskatchewan today. And I should say that Canada is actually very well known for pension administration and investment excellence. Other countries around the world look to PEBA. And in fact, there's a World Bank report that outlines what makes Canadian pension administration and management so good. And so this plan is aligned with what the World Bank said, and M&P used that World Bank report in its report as well. If you look to the west of us, there's some crown corporations in BC and Alberta that administer pension plans. And if you look to the east of us, essentially not-for-profit organizations owned by those plans or coordinated by those plans administer public pensions. So this plan aligns with best practice in Canada. If there was one tangible issue that was driving this for the PEP board and the MEP commission, it is around recruitment and retention. All organizations, of course, are struggling with recruitment and retention across all industries. But the board and the commission saw some of their key investment people leave over successive years before and into the beginning of the pandemic. And they posed the question, why is that? What is the challenge around recruitment and retention? And PEBA, because it's aligned with Government of Saskatchewan compensation, is not on a level playing field with other pension administrators in the province or the financial sector. And so recruitment and retention is a key challenge that the board and the commission want to address through this endeavor. And then lastly, I wanted to say that it does set the course for a higher performing organization. Having a corporate board, again, responsible for operations, risk, and strategy, should set us on a higher performing course. Now, that's not to say that there's an issue today, but we think this is in the long-term best interest of the organization. So if that's the overview on a slide, let me turn then to what M&P has said about this. Now, again, there are 60 pages in the M&P report itself, and that report is called Steady, Trusted, Future Ready, the case for establishing the Public Employees Benefits Agency as a nonprofit corporation to empower members. And that report's available on our website, on the PEBA website, on the PEP website, and on the MEP website, if you're interested in reading that whole report. Let me highlight just 4 things that M&P said. The first is that this is the next logical step in PEBA's evolution of continuous improvement for members. That is, we've already been on this journey to some degree already. PEBA already operates at an arm's length from government in a number of areas, including in IT. And we also have our own finance and corporate services area and our own small HR unit and internal audit unit. Now, there's some overlap in the finance and corporate services side with government, but we already are arm's length in some areas already. So this continues our journey towards being an arm's length administrator on behalf of members. The second thing they pointed out is it does not change individual pension plan governance or entitlements for members. This is maybe the most important part of the presentation, is that this change is on the back end. This is how the plans are administered, but it doesn't change how the plans are governed or the entitlements or the nature of the plans themselves. There are no changes in that regard, and I'm going to expand on that in just a minute. The third point I've already raised, and that is it addresses the key challenge that no one body has the authority to oversee and provide good governance to the whole of PEBA. Let me give you an example. Right now, the minister is responsible for PEBA, the Minister of Finance, and I report to the Deputy Minister of Finance, and that's a good and healthy relationship. But if the government decided it wanted to direct PEBA in a particular way, I would then turn to both the PEP board and the MEP commission and say, do you agree? Would you like to fund this thing that the government is directing? And so there is a partnership today, and it does work as a partnership, but there is a challenge that no one body has the authority to oversee and provide good governance to the whole of PEBA. We've never encountered a challenge of significance in this area, nor do we want to encounter one. And so this is a good governance change for us as an organization, for PEBA as an organization, and then for members, all the members that we serve. And the last bullet I wanted to highlight was that it is an opportune time to undertake the proposed change. We're in between election cycles, and so that is good. This is not a political move in any way. This change was initiated by the PEP board and the MEP commission. It's not a government initiative. The government is simply responding to a request from the board and from the commission. In addition, there's no particular issue to be addressed. In other jurisdictions, there might have been an issue with plan funding or performance by the administrator, maybe service standards or backlogs or quality. None of those issues exist. In fact, when we have surveyed members, both in PEP and in MEP, member satisfaction has been high. And notwithstanding the challenging economic environment this year, plan performance in both plans has been very good as well. So it's an opportune time to make this change. we specifically did not want to undertake this change under duress or under short timeframes in responding to some future issue that might happen. All right. So let's talk about what doesn't change before we talk about what does change and conclude the presentation. So the first thing, as I mentioned, that doesn't change is PEBA's plan portfolio. So all the plans that we administer today, both on the pension and benefit side, we expect will continue to administer into the future. Second thing that doesn't change is that the MEP Commission and the PEP Board retain all of their current representation and authority. So this change to adding a corporate board for PEBA does not in any way affect the MEP Commission or the PEP Board. They retain all their current representation, the people that represent members today, and all their decision-making authority remains. The corporate board will not be assuming any of that responsibility from them. And this is because the MEP and the PEP Acts do not change. Both plans are statutory plans, and there's no plans to change those acts as part of this transition. So the MEP and PEP Acts don't change. And not only are there acts, there are also regulations, and the government of Saskatchewan will still approve all of those regulations. For some on the call, this is a very important point. The government of Saskatchewan is still responsible for the public service superannuation plan funding. So there are no changes to PSSP or how it's funded as a result of this structure change for PEBA. So no change to the way that plan is funded. And of course, PEBA will still be subject to annual independent audits. We'll still produce annual reports for all the plans and for PEBA as the administrator. And the plans are still subject to regulation by the Financial and Consumer Affairs Authority under the Pension and Benefits Act. That's a provincial government entity. And by Revenue Canada with respect to the Income Tax Act. So I'll leave this slide up here just for a minute to remind you that these are all the things that aren't going to change with respect to PEBA's governance change, to PEBA's transition to become a not-for-profit. Okay, well, let's look at what does change. We'll look at what the governance looks like today and what it's going to look like in the future. So this is the way the plans and the administration are governed today. Today, there are three entities. There's the MEP Commission, and we shorthand that MEP-C. There's the Government of Saskatchewan, of course, and there's the Public Employees Pension Board, which we shorthand PEP-B. And the MEP Commission is responsible for the MEP plan. The Government of Saskatchewan is responsible for PEBA as an administrator. And the PEP Board is responsible, of course, for the Public Employees Pension Plan. Now, what makes this complicated, of course, is that the Commission and the Board fund PEBA as an administrator. Over 80% of our budget comes from these two plans. And ostensibly, then they also provide some direction. So this is a visual representation of the current state today. We make it work. It is a good partnership between the Government of Saskatchewan, the PEP Board, and the MEP Commission. But as you can see, there's an opportunity here. And so how have the Commission and the Board directed us to address this opportunity? Well, we'll still have the MEP Commission. We'll add in a not-for-profit corporation board or NPC board. The PEP Board, of course, remains. MEP-C, the Commission still is responsible for the MEP plan. The NPC board will be responsible for PEBA as administrator. And of course, the PEP Board stays and is responsible for the PEP plans. Nothing changes with respect to their governance of their plans. What's different now is that the arrows point to the board. And the reason for that is that the PEP Board and the MEP Commission will both fund PEBA. They'll also jointly appoint the board of directors. And that board of directors will be between 7 and 12 directors. It'll be selected based on a skills matrix. So it'll be a professional board. The board and commission will agree and appoint the directors jointly, and will of course have the ability to remove them as well. And as I mentioned, that board will oversee PEBA operations and services, strategy for the organization, and enterprise risk management. So really, the board and the commission will have two levers of control, both funding and appointment to the board, versus the single lever that they have today, which is only around funding. Okay, so this is the way we expect things to work into the future. Let me turn now to the issue of cost. This comes up quite consistently when we address this plan. So let me first talk about the two categories of cost. There are administration costs and investment costs. And investment management and performance fees, investment costs, vastly outweigh the administration costs. Investment costs for MEP are roughly 3 to 4 times the administration costs. And for PEP, depending on which plan you're in, they can be 5 to 7 times the administration costs. So for MEP members, this change that MMP estimates will be about a 5 to 10% increase in administration costs is not material. That is, the MEP Commission won't ever be thinking or considering a decision and say, well, we can't do that because our administration costs have gone up 5 to 10%. It simply won't show up in their valuation, the funding valuation that allows them to make decisions about benefits or contributions for their defined benefit plan. For PEP members, and we are PEP members, I'm a PEP member, it means 0.01 to 0.02% of the return per year as far as an increase. We call those basis points. That's what the industry term is. So 1 to 2 basis points is the estimate that the administration costs are going to go up based on MMP's work. So it's a very, very small percentage of the members' returns and of the fees. So that's my discussion of costs. Let me talk then, as I conclude my comments, about the rationale for change. And this slide is going to speak to maybe what's wrong with the status quo. What problem are we trying to solve today? As I mentioned right now, funding and direction are not currently aligned. Funding comes from the plans, but direction ostensibly comes from the government. Second, we are not on a level playing field, so there are uncompetitive wages and we face some turnover and then reliance on consultants. And if we have to replace certain functions with consultants on a short-term basis, that can be anywhere to 2 to 5 times the cost of an employee. Right now, because we operate through the revolving fund in the government of Saskatchewan, the government actually owns assets that are paid for by the plans, and the plans pay interest when they make capital expenditures. The plans must borrow from the government through the revolving fund to make capital purchases. So the government of Saskatchewan actually owns those assets and the plans pay interest. And interest is actually a bigger deal now in an era of higher inflation than it has been in the past. So that's an expense to the plans. And the plans are unable to consider certain opportunities to save plan members money. So whether that's where we're located and our lease costs, or whether we want to offer flexible working arrangements to our staff and maybe have a smaller physical footprint, or on the investment side, if we wanted to consider other ways to invest on behalf of members, it's actually best practice in Canada to invest somewhere around 20 to 30% of assets in-house for a plan of this size, of PEP size, and that can lead to certain cost savings for members as well. So right now, the plans are simply unable to consider those things. Now, let me talk about the rationale for change on basically how we're going to address those things. What are the positive benefits of this plan? First, it provides control over the administrator for MEP and PEP, aligning funding and direction. It's consistent with best practice across Canada to have your administrator be arm's length from government. It does provide more flexibility to respond to the environment. If you listen to our PEP board or our MEP commission members, they'll tell you that the pension industry is undergoing change and is expected to undergo more change in the future. We live in an era of change, a fluid environment, and this structure provides additional flexibility to respond to a changing environment, whether that's pandemics or financial conditions or the resource environment in terms of employees and recruitment and retention provides additional flexibility. And the new structure supports a higher performing organization. Having a corporate board that can hold the organization accountable sets the course for a higher performing organization. Again, PEBA is high performing now. We do a good job on behalf of members. We want that to continue into the future. It improves our risk posture. It allows for the organization to address and respond to risk in a more effective and efficient manner. And as I mentioned, the timing is right. We believe the timing is right, and the PEP board and the MEP commission believe the timing is right. So as I wrap up my comments, I just want to show you where we are in terms of a roadmap. We made the announcement to members in the spring of 2022, and we announced it on our website, on social media, and in the material we've mailed out to members in their newsletters. And then again, newsletters in the fall for both MEP and PEP members included highlights of this as we featured the chairs and their perspective on the move to an MPC. So the announcement was made in the spring of 2022, but the effective date is all the way out there into January 2024, although I guess it's not that far out anymore. It's a little over a year away. You can see on the timeline that we made the announcement in the spring. Legislation drafting happened in the summer. We're now just past the period where the legislation was introduced. The bill has received first and is in the process of going through the second reading stage. So the minister has introduced the bill and the opposition has had a chance to debate the bill in the legislature. The next stage will be second reading and then committee. And ultimately, we expect the bill to be passed in the spring of 2023. That will allow the corporate board to be appointed in the back half of 2023 and the NPC to officially launch in 2024. So our team is busy working in a number of different streams to prepare for that, but then there will obviously be some work in 2023, and then the real work begins as the new chapter opens in 2024. So those are my slides. Those are my comments. I'm going to stop sharing my screen there, and I'm happy to answer questions that you might have about this initiative, about this project, and about the direction for PEBA.
Okay, thank you, Jeremy. Thanks so much for your presentation and that information. That's very helpful to understand the journey and how and the various stages and where we are in it. And I think what we really wanted to do with this webcast was make sure that our members had a chance to both understand why, where you are, and where you're headed. And I know that there are questions. I know that we ourselves have some questions from the SRA that we have prepared. And we, talking with Lyle, that said questions were coming in quickly. So I'm going to now, again, thank you, Jeremy, for your presentation. And I'm going to move over to Lyle to help us through the question period.
Okay, thank you. I have quite a few questions. There is quite a few that are the same questions, so I'll try to consolidate them. The first question, Jeremy, is quite a simple one, but need you to verify. People need to know what PEP means and MEP means and MNP. There was no acknowledgement of those three acronyms.
Sure, happy to address all those. So PEP is the Public Employees Pension Plan. It is the largest defined contribution plan in Canada by quite a bit, actually. 70,000 members and over $11 billion in assets. It started in 1977. And so from 1977, it grew from 1,000 members and $1 million into 70,000 members and over $11 billion. MEP is the Municipal Employees Pension Plan. So that's the plan in Saskatchewan that is for municipal members or municipal functions, whether it's towns, cities, schools, et cetera, that don't have their own pension plan. So for example, City of Regina, City of Saskatoon, and other cities might have a plan, but PA, for example, is a member of that plan, and school divisions are members of that plan. And that plan actually has over 740 employers in it. So a lot of small towns, villages, and RMs are in that plan. PEP has over 140 employers. So the public service, Crown corporations, and then a number of other smaller organizations as well. And MNP used to stand for Myers Norris Penny, but I think they've actually gone away from using that moniker. So it's just MNP. They're one of the big accounting firms in Canada. And so they did this review for us. They were an outside party that gave us a perspective on this plan and this evaluation that you can read on our website if you're so inclined. It's about 60 pages in that report.
Thank you. Another question is, can you advise if the changes will increase fees, the MERS on all the plans, management fees, I guess?
For sure. And so there will be an increase to the administration cost. And let me speak to that just briefly. I had a slide there that broke down costs between investment costs and administration costs. Investment costs are by far the largest portion of what members pay. Now, for MEP, members don't see those costs directly. They're borne by the plan, and the benefit is based on a formula, years served, highest salary, et cetera. For PEP members, those fees are paid annually as a part of the overall return. And as I mentioned, right now, the administration cost is roughly 10 or 11 basis points per year. So 0.11% of a return is on the administration side. And then the investment fees are considerably higher, up to 50, 60, 70 basis points, depending on how you're invested in PEP. Because of course, PEP members have a choice of where to be invested. And so where you have more risk in your portfolio, so the accelerated growth side of things, then the fees are higher. And if you're in more conservative funds, the fees are lower. So there is an increase, probably about a 10% increase on the administration fees. So that works out to 1 or 2 basis points, or a very small percentage overall of the fees that members pay.
Thank you. Next question is from Jane from British Columbia. Currently, if the plan fails, and she's meaning PEP, the government would step in to support. With the new option, there will be no possibility of government support.
It's a great question, and thanks for raising it. I probably should have covered this in my presentation. The question, I think, is based on a logical assumption, but an incorrect one, unfortunately, that PEP is a defined contribution plan. And so the government's obligation is only to make contributions on behalf of the people it employs. It does not have an obligation to backstop the plan. That's actually true for MEP as well on the defined benefit side, that there's no legislation that would require the government to step in if there were significant plan losses in either plan. But especially for a DC plan where each member has an account, there is no obligation for the government to step in and to replace members' funds. Again, the only obligation they have is to make contributions as an employer, whether on the Crown side or the public service side. So the fact that PEBA is a government agency today can lead some members to assume that the government would backstop the plans in some way. And that's actually an incorrect assumption. And so this change actually clarifies for members the responsibilities of each party. The responsibility for the plan, for each plan, lies with the governing body. So the PEP board is responsible for the PEP plan. They are the fiduciaries and trustees of the plan. And the MEP Commission are the fiduciaries and trustees for the MEP plan. So it's their responsibility to ensure that the plan is well governed and that the investments are made well. They are the ones who are responsible, not the government of Saskatchewan. Hope that helps clarify.
Thank you. Question, explain this statement. We don't have control over today how this will change. This is one of our questions. Please explain the statement. What we don't have control over today, how will this change?
It's a good question. Thanks for it. So the question is about control. What do the MEP Commission and the PEP board not have control over today? So I'll give you a couple examples. They don't control senior leadership in the agency. They're clients. They have a contract with the government of Saskatchewan today. So they don't appoint the senior leader for the organization. That's one. They aren't able to make decisions about the location or the lease or any costs around that. That's dictated to them by the government of Saskatchewan. They don't have an ability to influence compensation or flexible working arrangements right now. So they don't have any control in those areas. And so really what the point I was trying to make in the presentation is that this change aligns funding and corporate direction for a multi-plan administrator, because we're not administering a single plan, but this aligns the funding and the direction and the control properly in a corporate board and provides the MEP Commission and the PEP board with that ability to control those things through the corporate board.
Okay, thank you. Next question, will the retirees have representation on the nonprofit commission or corporation?
It's a good question. So let me talk about representation on the PEP board and on the corporate board. Right now, the PEP board, the composition is outlined in statute. So it's in the legislation. And we expect there will be a composition review in probably 2024 or 2025. Today, there isn't a designated seat for retirees on the PEP board or on the MEP Commission, actually, for that matter. The corporate board, as I mentioned, is going to be a professional board. So it's going to be a skills-based board, so that we're not going to have designated seats based on representation bodies. It will be it will be appointed by the PEP board and the PEP commission based on a skills matrix and a skills mix. So they're going to look for people that have experience in the pension sector, in the financial services industry, in client service and technology, legal, investing, et cetera. So there'll be no designated seats. I don't think being retired will exclude anyone from being on the board, but there won't be a designated seat based on any kind of category in that regard.
Thank you. Dave from Regina asked approximately how many dollars does 1 or 2 basis point cost increase represents? Would you know that?
It would depend on the plan because each plan has its own budget. So I would have to go and look at the PEP budget. If the question was, what is the overall increase on the administration side for PEP? I would have to dig that out. I wouldn't have that right off the top of my head. But we express the costs or fees per members in basis points or percentage of the overall return. But I do have, if you give me 1 second, I can look at the cost per member. Just a few more clicks. So maybe while I'm finding that, I'll just say that we measure the cost per member against peer pension plans. So we use something called CEM benchmarking, and they put together a group of peers of pension plans, and they measure us in all kinds of ways, the service we provide and the costs. And in 2015 and 16, we did a CEM report. It's actually in the MNP report as well. And it showed that PEP was quite a bit below. And in that year, so 2015-16, it was $91 per member compared to a peer average of $169 per member per year. And in the most recent report that's going to the board, that number is $291 for the peer group. The peer group average is $291 per member. And the average cost per member for PEP members is $137 in 2021-22. So well below, in fact, less than half of the peer average. So $137 per member in 2021-2022 cost per member.
Thank you. So a couple of people have asked the question, is the board elected or appointed?
Okay, so depending on what board we're talking about, the PEP board is constituted based on the legislation of appointed members by the appointing body. So there are 4 employer representatives and 4 employee representatives, plus an independent chair that the board selects. So there are designated bodies that appoint each of the members on 4-year terms that can be renewed once, so up to 8 years. So each appointing body appoints a member to the PEP board, and they rotate through based on those terms, 4-year terms, up to 2-year total. MEP commission is similar. There's 12 members, and so there's 6 employee representatives and 6 employer representatives. The corporate board, as I mentioned, will be appointed, again, with term limits by the PEP board and MEP commission. Those details are being worked out.
Thank you. Question by Steve. What is the anticipated pay range for board members? I assume all costs would be reported in public accounts. Would that change much?
The compensation for the corporate board will be in line with other corporate boards in Saskatchewan. So one of the underlying principles for the PEP board and MEP commission has been level playing field from the compensation side. And so that will extend as well to the corporate board as well. So the compensation for the corporate board will be in line with what other corporate board are paid in Saskatchewan. In terms of being reported in public accounts, it'll be reported in our annual report, I think. I don't know if it'll be in public accounts.
Okay. I'm just trying to get questions are coming in fast and furious. Can you advise if fund managers will change? This is Debbie from Regina.
Excellent question. So I want to reiterate that for investment decisions, there is no change to how those decisions are made. So the PEP board and the MEP commission will continue to make all the decisions with respect to their investments. PEBA provides recommendations alongside world-class investment advisors, both Mercer and Aon and Hamilton Lane. So that process will not change. So the MEP commission and the PEP board will retain all their current authority to choose fund managers. And so there are no changes to fund management or investment management as a result of this change. Both the board and the commission, the PEP board and the MEP commission, have a 5-year cycle where they do a strategic investment review. And so it's in that context that they make changes to the investment portfolio, the structure, and the managers within that structure.
Thank you. There's a couple of questions about the PSSP. Is there any change to that with this change to the plans?
No change at all with respect to PSSP. We serve PSSP now under an agreement with the government of Saskatchewan, and we'll continue to do so. So the government of Saskatchewan is responsible to fund PSSP, and will continue to be responsible to fund PSSP, and we'll continue to pay pensions. If you're interested, we still actually have 11 active members in PSSP and 1 inactive member, but 4,277 pensioners. So we'll continue to pay all those pensioners, and the government of Saskatchewan will continue to be responsible to pay those pensions.
And I have a question from Twyla. What skills will be required for new board members?
I think this question is probably about the corporate board. So skills for the corporate board will be in those areas I mentioned. So there'll be financial services industry experience, pension benefits experience, investment experience, legal experience, client service, technology. The PEP board and MEP commission are going to want a well-rounded, skills-based board to oversee the corporation, the nonprofit corporation.
Here's one though about the question by a few people where if it isn't broke, why is it getting fixed?
It's a good question. I do get that question from time to time as well. If it's not broke, why fix it? Let me say a couple things about that. As I mentioned, the PEP board and the MEP commission are trustees and fiduciaries of their plans. So they're responsible ultimately for the administration of the plans and for risk management. So in their view, it wouldn't be prudent to wait until there is an issue. It's best to learn from Canadian best practice, to look around the country and to see what is working well, and to see where what's working well would make sense for the plans that they are responsible for. So that's really their belief, is that this is in the best interest of plan members long-term. I think everyone on the call understands that pension plans are long-term endeavors. The horizon is 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. That's certainly the investment horizon. And we understand that the relationship between the plan member and the plan should be lifelong. That's the goal of the plan, is to provide lifelong benefits. And so taking a broad lens, they believe that this is prudent and in the best interest of plan members, that you don't wait until something needs to be broken, something needs to be fixed because it is broken. They've also looked and learned from the experience across Canada. There were cases in Canada where maybe a plan was underfunded for some reason, or where maybe the service being provided wasn't what plan members expected and didn't meet plan member needs. And then there was a need to scramble or respond to that situation. And that isn't the case today, as you know, but they didn't want to wait for something like that to happen. And certainly, as I mentioned before, around recruitment and retention, they don't want to wait until there is a crisis when it comes to recruiting and retaining key staff for their administrator. They want to make sure that they're providing the right foundation and the right conditions to have a stable, sustainable, and high-performing organization over the long term.
Question from Harold. Is the government fully backing this change?
All right, Harold from Regina writes in and says, is the government fully backing this change? The government of Saskatchewan is responding to the request by the PEP board and MEP commission. And so it's gone through government decision-making processes, and the minister has introduced the bill to create the not-for-profit corporation and then allow PEBA to be transferred to that corporation. So it's very important to understand that this is not a government initiative. It's an initiative that was initiated by the PEP board and MEP commission on behalf of all plan members, and the government is responding to their request. And I think you can see that by the fact that they introduced the bill, they are supportive of this direction.
Thank you. Another question on the board itself. Will the board be gender balanced?
Will the board be gender balanced? I think those are discussions that the PEP board and the MEP commission will have. I don't know that there's been a particular discussion exactly about representation or gender balance to date. I don't think there would be any reason for it not to be, but I'm not sure that there'll be a requirement that certain seats have to be filled in a particular way.
And Debbie asked this question earlier. Will any changes be on the online portfolio mix and any changes to the plans themselves because of this huge change?
Right. So this is a back-end administrative change, sort of the legal structure, the governance structure for PEBA. No changes to the way the plans are governed, no change to the investment structure as a result of this plan. No, so all the way the plan is invested today, subsequent to this strategic investment review, the plans we're going through right now, will be the way the plans are invested in the future. So the corporate board won't have a say in how plans funds are invested. That's the responsibility of the trustees, of the fiduciaries of the plans. And that's, if you're a member of PEP, the PEP board is responsible to invest your funds. And if you're a member of MEP, the commission is responsible to invest those funds.
Thank you. Stephen asked a question. I expect there'll be a one-time cost for transition to the proposed new model. What is the estimate of that change?
Excellent question. MMP does cover that in their report. It's about $1 million shared between the two plans is the initial startup cost or the transition costs. And so that's, about $500,000 for each plan. And we're on target roughly in that direction right now. That's our forecast right now, is to be roughly in line with that $1 million startup cost, which is shared between the two plans.
And Larry asked a question, will the management expense ratio be reported comparable to mutual funds in the future, or will that change much?
Our expense ratios today are published for PEP. This is a PEP question, obviously.
Yeah.
If you go to the PEP website, you can see the expense ratio for each of the funds. And so we don't publish a comparison. In a sense, we don't have a table that shows PEP versus other funds, but we do publish the expense ratio for each of the funds that members can choose from. I made a note in advance of this meeting, and the accelerated growth fund is at 0.78 in the last year reported, and the conservative fund is at 0.47, and then the funds in between are in between those two numbers. But members can find that information on our website if they're so interested. I would maybe make a plug that one of the many benefits of being in PEP is that you get tremendous diversified investments, so great risk-adjusted returns for lower fees than retail, lower than what you can get. So you get better diversification and risk-adjusted returns than you can get if you were to go to the retail market, for lower fees as well that you can find in the retail market. And again, we're cost recovery. We're operating in a nonprofit model today, so there are no sales here. In fact, you have access to certified financial planners who can speak to you one-on-one or in workshops. Those services are available to you as a member free of charge. And so that's one of the major differentiators between us and if you were to compare to a financial institution or a private money manager.
I have a question from Denise. You mentioned that SAS government owns assets paid by the plan pays interest. What will happen to those assets? How will this be addressed for the changes taking place?
It's a good question. The assets will be purchased by the plan. So right now they're amortized, and so the assets will be purchased by the plans as part of the transition, and they'll become part of the corporate assets. So from a balance sheet perspective, there's no impact to the Government of Saskatchewan balance sheets or the plan's balance sheets, but there'll be that transaction that happens, and there'll be no more interest then paid as well on those capital expenditures.
Another question, are MLA pensions invested in these funds, or are their pensions invested in somewhere different?
MLAs in Saskatchewan are PEP members. So MLAs are PEP members, like members of the public service or Crown Corporation. So they have individual balances just like everybody else, and their contributions are made as a percentage of salary, just like every other PEP plan member.
Okay. I'll wait a couple minutes. I'm just waiting for questions to come in. One of the comments from Jane was great choice to the speaker on this issue for you, Jeremy.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
It's very kind.
I'm still waiting for some questions. If people have some last questions on this, I'll wait a minute. I have a question that we have.
Sure.
Well, what are these conflicts? Why hasn't there been, or why hasn't it been a problem in years since PEBA was created?
Thanks for that question. So this is about potential conflict of interest, not responding to an actual conflict of interest. The partnership has been very healthy between the government of Saskatchewan, the PEP plan, and the municipal employees pension plan. I guess this is when you think about potential conflicts of interest, I would just use some examples that have been in the media in the last couple of years. If you look to the east of us in Manitoba, the previous premier mused in the media about whether or not certain plans might get together and invest together and save some money, or essentially he thought maybe the plans could operate in a different way. And those pension plans said to him sort of collectively, thanks, but no thanks, sort of mind your own business. So that's an example of where the government might have an idea about how pensions should be administered. And you might be familiar in Alberta as well. There was a sense and in the media that the government wanted the Alberta Teachers Plan to use the provincial investment Crown Corporation. And the teachers said, no, wait a minute, we have the authority to decide how our funds are invested. The government can't tell us how or who should invest our funds. And so there was some tension there about who had the governing authority. So it's those kind of things that have led all pension plans in Canada to move to be arm's length, to even remove the perception of conflict of interest, and to remove any kind of temptation that there could be direction in any way about common interests, or maybe the plans should do this or that. That arm's length administration really is best practice for pension plans in Canada, and that we're looked to as an example around the world. And that really is in the best interests of plan members, that it's their governing bodies, their board, the PEP board, the MEP commission, that should be unfettered, in the words of my predecessor, unfettered to make decisions on behalf and in the best interests of plan members.
Thanks, Jeremy. Another question from Lawrence. From what the slides show, it looks like we're on track to meet the deadlines. Are there any concerns that we might delay us on meeting these deadlines?
Thanks for that question. Right now, when I report on this project, I say that we're green across the board in all the different work streams. We're on track. Now, lots can happen between now and 2024, but right now, we're right on where we need to be. The legislation has been introduced. It's at second reading. We think it'll move to committee at some point this fall or in the spring, and that the legislation will be passed in the spring. And that will allow us to appoint the corporate board in the back half of 2023. And in the meantime, my team behind the scenes is working to prepare us on the finance and corporate services side, on the HR side, on the policy side. We're working through all of those things. So right now, we don't see any hiccups or any roadblocks. Will there be speed bumps? I think every project has speed bumps somewhere, but right now we think we're on track. It's part of the reason that we set out a target date of January 2024. We wanted to give ourselves enough runway to do this transition really, really well. In other jurisdictions, there was a shorter time frame, to be honest. It was announced and then you had to move quite quickly. And we think that this is the right pace for this change. And when we've spoken to those other jurisdictions, that when they went through this transition, they expressed admiration for our timelines and said that's the right way to do it, as opposed to trying to rush it through quickly.
Stephen kind of piggybacked on this. This is a high risk of upcoming recession. This will put much pressure on the new corporate board to deal with, as it will establish governance policy. Is it now a good time for a change?
It's a good question. Let me just allow some time to clarify that in terms of recession and investment risk, that risk is borne by the PEP board and the MEP commission. The corporate board won't speak to investment risk directly. It'll speak to corporate risks, but not investment risks. So the PEP board and the MEP commission will retain the responsibility to address its investment structure. And in both cases, they believe that a well-diversified portfolio should allow them to navigate whatever is coming next. So members might know on the call that there really are three portfolios that we use for investing. There's equities, there's fixed income, and there's alternatives. And then within each of those categories, there are subcategories of the way the money is invested. And we hire, they hire, and we hire, in our mind, the best money managers to navigate whatever is coming next. They don't make bets. They don't decide we're going to put all our money in this direction or that direction based on this forecast or that forecast. They believe in well-diversified investments, an all-weather portfolio, as it were. And so if there is a recession in the United States or in Canada or in Europe, they'll still make the best decisions on behalf of members for those investment allocations.
Celeste asked a question: is there anything that we as retired government employees have to be concerned about with this change, other than what's been mentioned?
So from my perspective, retired government employees should not be concerned about this change. We really appreciate your interest and your engagement, and we know that our retired members are some of our most engaged members in their plan, and we really appreciate that. We look forward to speaking to you, whether it's on the phone, whether it's email or in person. All those avenues are available to you, but we don't believe that there are any concerns to be mitigated or to be managed or to be concerned about on your behalf. The PEP board and MEP commission, they are again fiduciaries and trustees of the plan. They are acting in your best interest, both active members, deferred members, and retired members. They consider all interests of all plan members, and they always act in the best interest of all plan members. So we appreciate your engagement. We appreciate the questions. You can ask questions after this forum as well, whether it's to our pension information officers on the phone or via email. There'll be a future PEP and MEP member town halls. I think in February of 2023, we're planning to run some town halls again to address any questions that members might have. So we welcome your questions, but we don't believe there should be any, you should be concerned about this change. This is really about the back end, the legal framework, the governance framework for PEBA as an administrator of multiple plans. Again, 12 pension plans, 23 benefit programs that we oversee.
Thank you. And she said, excellent presentation, Jeremy. All these questions that have been coming in will be looked at and answered on our website, so that any question that has been brought in will be answered. So at this point, I'll pass it back to Randy to wind up.
Okay, thank you, Lyle, and thank you, Jeremy. And again, excellent questions, and thanks for the straightforward answers, Jeremy. That's very helpful, I think, to our members to hear directly from you and from PEBA about what's going on. So we appreciate that. And the members that send in questions, thank you to you for doing that. Sometimes on these kind of webcasts, there's always a little bit of shyness to see if you want to send in questions, but we didn't experience that today, and that's really good. And so thanks so much. So moving along then, this is one of a series of information sessions or webcasts that we've I mentioned earlier in the broadcast. So what we're doing is we want to run a series of these over the next months, like today, to engage with you as our members and to provide opportunities for dialogue on a variety of different topics. Coming in the new year, our series, as you can see, we will be talking about generic drugs. We will have a speaker from the University of Saskatchewan talking to us about debunking some of the myths about generic drugs. We'd like to get your feedback on that one. We will be doing a session around post-retirement planning, again with support from PEBA, we believe, and that is scheduled for the new year. Then past that, we also will be looking at a session around healthy lifestyle choices. That directly relates to some of the pressure points that we are seeing in our group benefits plan, related to some issues, particularly issues like diabetes, high blood pressure, those types of issues. And we want to speak with you about that. Later on towards the spring and towards our annual meeting, there will be a session hosted and resourced by the Saskatchewan Seniors Mechanism. Members will be aware, we hope, that the SRA has been supporting that advocacy issue around home supports and independent living. And we'll be doing a session with those resources, a longer session like this one, to answer your questions and provide information. Mark your calendars. Our annual general meeting is on May 25th. Our anticipation right now is that we will run a process of both virtual and in person. I'll have to work out the logistics of that, but that's our intention, is to try and provide opportunity for people to both attend, that choose to attend, and at the same time, for those that are more, further away from Regina, provide a chance for you to also participate with us. So I think with that, we're approaching the wrap up. And so I would once again just thank your participation. 100, I believe the final number was about 140 of you logged in. So that's excellent. We appreciate that very much. Once again, thanks to you, Jeremy, for participating with us. We will, at the conclusion of this, there will be a short survey, I believe, come up on your screen to give us some feedback as to how you viewed this session and what your thinking is, to give us some advice. So as we move forward into future webcasts, we can take the learnings from this one, good, bad, or indifferent, and incorporate that into what we do next. So with that, I would express on behalf of the SRA board, thanks to board members, particularly thanks to Harold and Lyle and Ken Lazinski, who's been our backup this morning and giving us a hand. And Lyle, especially for stick handling all those questions. Thank you. And a special thanks to Terry Scott, VoiceWorks, Webcast Canada, that are behind the production of this event to make sure it's stable, make sure it runs well, and that. And so with that, I will just draw it to a conclusion and wish you all the best. We're a little far in front of the festive season, but I will wish you the happy holidays at this stage in case we don't talk to you in between, and farewell for now. And so thanks again and have a great day. See you soon. Bye-bye.